the man who broke the news multiple times about the McGregor stuff over the last few years, and he gave the report this week that the Khabib-Poirier fight might have a snag to work through. We'll get to that as well as some picks for you to make some money tonight on UFC 238. The man, the myth, the legend, at Talk MMA on Twitter, my man Dizz. How you doing today?
Hey, how you guys doing? Great to be back on the show. And for probably the most stacked card of 2019 for the UFC.
Yeah, how much do you think, before we get to the other stuff, how much do you think that, when this card was coming together, that the UFC realized that they had, this much juice as it was coming together? Do you think maybe when they were done building it, they were like, oh, snap, we got something really good here?
I think what happened was that they had a good card. The UFC has got, the UFC and WME, William Morris Endeavor, their owners, they have what is described to be Harvard-like individuals putting together statistics and in their PR department. And what they looked at was that, unfortunately, unless your name is Chris Cyborg or Ronda Rousey, you're not really getting a whole lot of pop when it comes to WMMA. Henry Cejudo and Marlon Moraes. I mean, Henry Cejudo is the big name in this. Everybody's going to find out who Marlon Moraes is tonight if they didn't know who he was already. And I think that they needed some extra pop. So when they went with the extra pop, they said, you know what, let's add Tony Ferguson and Donald Cerrone to it. Everyone knows who these two are. And so when they put that on there, they said, I think at first, before that fight was even put together or announced, they said, well, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's getting a whole lot of buzz. Let's go ahead and pull the trigger on Cerrone, on Cowboy and versus Ferguson. So after that, and they started getting the buzz on it, I think they were really happy with what they were looking at, what they were getting. And it's a really good card from top to bottom. I mean, they've got some names. I mean, they're kicking off the fight with Caitlin Chukagian and Joanne Calderwood. That's the very first fight of the night. And then, there's some other filler fights in between, with my dude, Eddie Wineland from Indiana. I have to throw a shout out to a Hoosier and a WEC alumni. They've also got, Ricardo Lamas, who's a Chicago native. And they've also got Karolina Kowalkiewicz and Alexa Grasso, Aljamain Sterling and Pedro Munoz, and who's an RFA, former RFA alumni as well. And then Tatiana Suarez, a rising up-and-comer with the strawweight versus Nina Anzarov, she's starting to make her name as well. So, and that's just before we get to the main card. So I think that when they look at this card up and down, I think they're pretty happy with it. Now they're just going to have to sit back and see what happens in terms of pay-per-view buys. I think it's going to do okay. I'm not going to say it's not going to do John Jones, Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey numbers, period. But it's going. I think it'll do okay. I'm not, and you hear my voice in the way it'll do okay. It's not. You're not hearing me go crazy about it because anymore, with piracy and illegal streams, people have found a way to get around the $60 price tag, which is something I talked about in podcast. The last podcast I did on that one guy's podcast was I did what I felt like the UFC should do with UFC Fight Pass. And I thought they should have gone to a WWE network sort of deal. If you're a subscriber, then you get the pay-per-views. And more people will come in and buy the subscriptions rather than, saying, so I have to pay for a subscription and I also have to pay the extra. Never mind. Just never mind. I don't feel like paying the extra $60 for a pay-per-view.
Speaking of the pay-per-view, I want to hit on this topic with you before we bang out some of our picks for this card. When the news initially came out about Khabib and Dustin, I'm like, this makes sense, yada, yada, yada. But then you came out with the report saying, hey, folks, time out. This deal isn't done. I got to wonder, how much is the change in the pay-per-view model affecting some of these negotiations?
Well, I don't think it's really that. I think what it really is that they are having I think it's fighters nowadays are starting to understand what their value is. Dustin Poirier is the interim title holder. Let's treat him like one. Khabib Nurmagomedov, he just had a deal done where he is now one of the highest paid fighters. He's undefeated. Why shouldn't he be one of the highest paid fighters?
Sure.
In the UFC right now. I think some of the fighters, and the thing I always talk about with the UFC pay scale, no, not everybody deserves a high pay scale. Not everybody deserves a really high pay scale. Do something to make yourself stand out. You do, and in words of Dana White, you do eat what you kill. If you're not killing it, you're not going to be eating so much. And that's, like for instance, Jimmy Rivera is probably, probably not going to make as much as, Dustin Poirier should. Like anybody who's on the undercard who's begging for main event pay. Right now, Ronda Rousey is a worldwide name. John Jones is a worldwide name. Conor McGregor is a worldwide name. People have to understand that MMA is just a very small bubble where you may have like 1 million hardcore fans. There's probably just a little bit more than that who are casual fans. It's where a guy may be a big name. Dustin Poirier may not be known outside of MMA. And that's what they base these big pay scales on. It's like, okay, so how much worldwide attraction are you giving us? If you're not giving us worldwide
really quick,
attraction,
you just mentioned the analytics guys. Those guys are doing research and seeing, okay, whose name is pinging, whose name is bouncing on different websites, on different platforms. What is drawing people to not just the event for the box office, not just the pay-per-view, not just the ESPN Plus, which gives the UFC a whole new set of numbers, but you can track Twitter trends, you can track, internet traffic. There's so many ways to track this information now.
And not to mention digitally outside of the United States. What are numbers doing internationally? If these numbers are pinging internationally, and with the I think Sky Sports has the European deal right now.
Yep.
Or UK deal right now. That's you have to account for. We're not seeing those numbers either. So those are numbers that affect the pay scale. If you're not dinging those numbers as well, you're not going to get the paycheck that you're not deserving. I hate to be that guy. I'm not pro promotion. I'm pro money. So I need to see where a famous fighter once asked me. Actually, I'll let you know. It was a conversation I had between Eddie Alvarez and myself. If anybody recalls, a long time ago, I dinged Bjorn Rebs. I've been using the word ding a lot today. I don't know why, but I hammered Bjorn Rebney really hard for not letting Eddie Alvarez, out of the exclusive negotiation deal with Bellator years ago. But I also made a comment about somebody not deserving the pay that they deserve. And Eddie sent me a text and he said, I'm kind of confused. Are you for the fighter or are you for the promoter? I said, I'm for whatever's right, whatever makes sense. Eddie Alvarez deserved a lot of money, but that doesn't mean his teammate that nobody's ever heard of, Marlon Moraes, deserves Eddie Alvarez money. Mm-hmm. Marlon is just now making a name, becoming a killer after a poor debut against Rafael Sunsao that arguably he did win, but then he had to come back and he knew that once the jitters were over that he had to, come back and just start knocking a bunch of people out and showing everybody who he really is. So when it comes in terms of pay scale, you got to make your name for yourself. You can't just do it legitimately. Don't get out there and just say you called somebody out and they're ducking you. If you're unranked, of course, Dustin Poirier is not going to fight you. Or if you're not ranked, of course, you don't deserve next in line just because you called somebody out. That doesn't pay the money. What you do inside that cage and then what you say in combination, that's what gets you paid.
All right, let's bang out some of these picks. Let's make some folks some money today. As they here in New Jersey, they can bet on stuff around here. So people can do parlays, people can do picks. Let's start with the top of the card. You got Cejudo versus Marlon Moraes. Look, I know that Marlon is the favorite on the Vegas line, but to me, I think people are undervaluing the fact that, Marlon is a guy who trains with, you mentioned Eddie Alvarez, Frankie Edgar. He's from the local area training up at Tom's River. And this is a step up in competition to me for Cejudo, and he's facing a guy in Marlon who is going to take it to him, and Marlon's not afraid. And I think Cejudo, I think his ego's getting a little big heading into this fight.
Marlon Moraes has taken out the guy that beat him in his UFC debut by submission. He's beaten Jimmy Rivera by KO. He beat John Dodson, a very stout Greg Jackson fighter, by split decision. He beat Aljamain Sterling with a knockout in 1 minute. If you look at the times, he beat Jimmy Rivera in 33 seconds. He beat Aljamain Sterling in 1 minute and 7 seconds. He beat Rafael Sunsao in the first round after going. I mean, he's a killer. This guy's kickboxing is very underrated. And I think Henry Cejudo, I think he's underrating his wrestling too, which Marlon Moraes has very underrated wrestling. And MMA wrestling is not the same as Olympic caliber wrestling. They're two different ballparks. They are, and I think guys like Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard and all those guys have proven that at the lighter weight scale. Henry Cejudo tonight, he's going to be in for a fight tonight, and I think Marlon Moraes gets it done. I think he catches Cejudo. I think this. I'm going to say, and I don't know if he doesn't get it done in round 2. He'll probably have him wore out in round 3. But I think if it goes into the later rounds, though, I think Henry Cejudo has a wrestling grinder's edge. But I think Marlon Moraes is going to catch him within 1 or 2 or 3 rounds.
Co-main event, just want to keep it moving here. Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica Eye, because we're running out of real estate here, my man. I think this plus 800 might be a juicy bet for people, because
I think
Jessica's a bulldog, and she's not afraid of Valentina. And Valentina, no offense, some of her opponents, they've been some great fighters, but they haven't had the tenacity that Jessica's going to bring in here. And I'm not saying Jessica is an outright winner, but there might be some money to be made if this fight goes 4 or 5 rounds and she just ends up, wearing out and beating the snot out of Shevchenko.
Jessica Eye has the best lateral movement at 125 pounds when it comes to her striking. She has very underrated wrestling game as well, having practiced and trained with Olympic silver medalist Sarah McMahon. She used to train with her back in the day. She's done sparring sessions and wrestling with her. Valentina Shevchenko is great everywhere. Jessica Eye is underratedly great everywhere. Her striking, and remember she busted open a Leslie Smith ear a long time ago in a very, very nasty fashion. But I've seen some of the Valentina Shevchenko's pre-fight hype, and I got to be honest with you, listening to her kind of reminded me of Drago's wife back in Rocky IV. Just kind of got a little annoying listening to her talk. It says that nobody can beat Ivan Drago, and it's just like, oh, God, right. She's starting to annoy me a little bit. It seemed like she's coming in underrating Jessica, and that might be mentally an edge for Jessica. As you said, I go pit bull on her, not bulldog, but I think that Jessica has no pressure on her being an underdog in this fight. My heart says Jessica Eye wins this fight. My head says Valentina Shevchenko wins this fight. So even though where my head is at on this, I think that putting money down on Jessica Eye is not a bad idea.
And also putting money down on the fight going 5 rounds might be a good value play as well. Ferguson versus Cerrone. Cerrone plus 135. There's some money to be made there too, because if you're going to pick Cerrone, that could pay off big. Let's not forget, Cerrone's been very active the last few years, while Ferguson has had some injury issues.
Yeah, not just some injury issues, but does this guy just have a knack for quick recovery? I mean, how did this guy recover so quickly and then come back and take out guys like, Anthony Pettis, and made quick work of Anthony Pettis, who actually has a win in Chicago over Donald Cerrone, if you guys don't remember that fight. I was there. I think it was by TKO, to be honest with you. But Tony Ferguson's on an 11-fight win streak dating back to 2012 or 13. Donald Cerrone can win the fight anywhere. He can do it striking. He can do it via submission. But he's also a slow starter, which I think is an advantage for and I mean a slow starter as of lately. which I think it is an advantage for Tony Ferguson. I think he comes out hyped. I think he comes out aggressive, knowing that. And man, I got to tell you what, don't be surprised if you see Tony Ferguson win this by TKO as well. I think Donald Cerrone's got good submission defense, so I don't think that Darce is gonna cut it. He's gonna have to win it by TKO, I believe. But if it happens by submission, I wouldn't be surprised either. I think Tony Ferguson wins tonight and wins in 2 rounds.
All right, let's quick pick 'em. Rivera, Yan, who do you got?
Rivera. I'm gonna go Rivera. I think he's got the motive for it.
You got Suarez or Nina?
I'm going to say Tatiana Suarez keeps the ball rolling. And I'm also going to go with Blagoy Ivanov, former World Series of Fighting champ as well. I think Pedro Munoz upset Aljamain Sterling. I think Kawakowicz gets it done. I think she gets back on track. And this might be the swan song for Ricardo Lamas tonight.
I'm gonna give everybody a real quick parlay here. You put Marlon Moraes, combined him with Ivanov, and then pair him up with Munoz. That's a really sweet payout right there.
Just might be, yeah. Like I said, this is a good card, and it's everybody should tune in and watch this card just like they tuned in to listen to this interview.
Follow him at Talk MMA on Twitter for all your MMA inside information. He is the man, the myth, the legend. He is Dizz. I appreciate the time, my friend.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me back on. Be good.